All right, let's get right into it. When you think about a performance exhaust, what comes to mind? Probably loud noises, shiny pipes, right? But what if I told you the most powerful part of any exhaust system is something you can't even see, because it's literally made of sound? And that brings us to maybe the biggest, most argued over question in the entire car world. Does your engine actually need some back pressure to work right? You've heard it a million times on forums and at car meets. Well, today we're going to settle it for good using physics. You know the two camps. You've got one group that swears you need a little bit of back pressure to build that low-end torque. And then you have the other group, usually the racing guys, who say that any resistance at all is just robbing you of horsepower. So, who's right? The truth is, they're both kind of missing the point, because they're asking the wrong question entirely.
To solve this whole paradox, we have to get our terms straight. What do we even mean when we say back pressure?
Okay, so by its very definition, back pressure is just resistance. It's a force literally pushing back on the piston when it's trying to do its job and push the burnt gas out. And making the piston fight against a force costs energy. Period. There's no way around it. From a purely mechanical view, back pressure is always bad news.
So, if back pressure is the enemy, where did this whole myth come from? Well, it comes from people confusing simple resistance with something way cooler and way more powerful. A little thing called exhaust scavenging. This is the real secret sauce. And scavenging has absolutely nothing to do with restriction. It's all about using sound waves that are already flying through your exhaust pipes. Let's break down how this invisible engine actually works. First thing you gotta do is change how you picture exhaust. It is not a smooth river of gas flowing out of your tailpipe. No, every single time an exhaust valve pops open, it unleashes a violent, high-pressure pulse of gas, basically a sound wave that blasts down that pipe. And how fast are we talking? Well, the speed of sound. Now, here's the kicker. That speed changes with temperature. In hot exhaust gas, say around 500 degrees Celsius, that sound wave is moving at a crazy 600 to 650 meters per second. This is the key variable engineers get to play with, because the timing, how long it takes for that wave to go down the pipe and come back, is everything. So here's where the magic happens. That high-pressure pulse travels down the pipe. When it gets to the end, where the pipe opens up into a collector or just the atmosphere, it reflects. But it does something amazing. It flips. It comes back as a negative pressure wave, a vacuum. Now, if we can time this just right, that little vacuum pulse arrives back at the cylinder right when the exhaust valve is about to close and the intake valve is just starting to open. That vacuum literally sucks the last bit of exhaust out and helps pull the new air and fuel mixture in for free. That's scavenging. You've basically created a supercharger out of thin air and sound.
And this right here is the whole game. An open end creates that helpful negative wave we want, but a closed end, or a restriction like a crush pipe or a bad muffler, does the exact opposite. It reflects a positive pressure wave. That wave shoves back against the cylinder, hurts performance, and can cause something called reversion. That's when exhaust gas literally gets pushed backward into the cylinder, poisoning the fresh air and fuel. If you've got a really rough idle or you find soot inside your intake manifold, you might have a reversion problem.
Okay, so that's the physics, but how do engineers actually use this stuff in the real world? Because, the goals can be completely different depending on what kind of engine you're dealing with. Now, two-strokes are the big exception here. They actually break the rules on purpose. You've seen those crazy-looking expansion chambers on dirt bikes, right? Well, that's a super finely tuned instrument. It's designed to create a reflected positive wave to literally shove the fresh fuel and air that escaped back into the cylinder just before the port closes. It is the perfect example of using wave tuning, not just flow, to make serious power. But for most modern cars, the story splits. On a naturally aspirated engine, the goal is all about maximizing that scavenging effect. We use perfectly calculated header pipe lengths to time those negative waves just right. For a turbocharged engine, though, you throw that whole playbook out the window. The turbine is already a restriction you have to live with. Any more back pressure after it is just choking the entire system. The goal becomes dead simple. Get the gas out and get it out fast. And why do turbos hate it so much? Well, back pressure after the turbine kills the pressure difference across it, which makes the turbine way less efficient. That means more turbo lag, sky-high exhaust gas temps, and it can even lead to really dangerous stuff like compressor surge. That's when the airflow through the turbo actually reverses itself. It's violent and it can literally destroy the turbo. So all of this means that designing a real performance exhaust isn't about slapping on the biggest pipe you can find. It's a precise science.
It involves calculating lengths, diameters, and even using methods like the area progression method to make sure each section of the pipe expands correctly to keep the gas moving fast. It's all about becoming a master of these invisible sound waves.
And I mean, this is not guesswork. Engineers use formulas based on the exact RPM you want your peak power at and the precise moment the exhaust valve opens to figure out the perfect length for the header tubes. As you can see, a shorter pipe is going to time that helpful negative wave for high RPM power. A longer pipe times it for mid-range torque. It's just pure acoustics. And hey, it's not just about how long the pipe is. How it's bent is a huge deal. The cheap way is a crush bend, which you can see on the right. It literally squishes the pipe, creating a bottleneck that kills flow and messes up those pressure waves. A proper mandrel bend maintains that full diameter all the way through the corner. It costs more, but it's the only way to make sure the system actually works.
So what happens when it's wrong? Well, too much back pressure, too much restriction, and you'll feel the engine fall on its face at high RPM. But putting on a pipe that's too big is just as bad. When the pipe is oversized, the exhaust gas slows down. This makes the scavenging pulses weak and totally ineffective, especially at lower RPMs. That's exactly why slapping a massive 4-inch exhaust on a little stock engine often makes it feel lazy and kills all your torque. You've destroyed the gas velocity.
So that brings us all the way back to the beginning. With all this physics in our back pocket, what's the final answer? Is back pressure a friend or an enemy?
Let's just lay it all out. For a two-stroke engine, yes, absolutely essential. For a modern, fuel-injected, naturally aspirated or turbocharged engine, absolutely not. You want minimum resistance and maximum scavenging. And diesels? Well, they're a special case. They use back pressure on purpose for emission systems like EGR or for things like exhaust brakes, but never, ever for making more power.
So the next time somebody tells you that your engine needs back pressure, you can tell them the truth. The goal is never, ever resistance. The goal is to master fluid dynamics, to turn your exhaust pipe into a finely tuned musical instrument and use invisible sound waves to give yourself a free supercharger. And how cool is that?